Hi folks, so I've made quite a big thing in previous videos about how reach is really a big advantage with weapons, okay? But that's within one particular context, and it's the context within the way that I normally train and most of the historical arts that I study and the way that I spar, and that is within an unarmoured context. That is essentially civilian one-on-one fighting. In a civilian one-on-one fight, out of armour, reach is a massive advantage. The spearman has a huge advantage, generally speaking, over a swordsman. Someone with a great sword has a huge advantage over someone with a short sword. Someone with a sword has a huge advantage over someone with a dagger, and so on. However, that changes a lot in different types of context, okay? One obvious context where a very long weapon or extra reach doesn't benefit you really at all is if you start the fight essentially next to the person you're fighting, okay? And there are certain situations where this could happen in modern life or indeed it happened in history. One example being in if you're fighting in an enclosed space, for example, if you're engaged in sort of built up areas in combat, if you're engaged in taking rooms, for example. And this has even happened in modern combat in fairly recent times, and of course happened in the Second World War and Vietnam and various other modern wars, where occasionally it does come to face-to-face fighting, either with butts of rifles or with bayonets or knives or whatever. So even in modern warfare it does still happen occasionally, and it happened in caves in Afghanistan quite recently as well. So this kind of surprise element where you find yourself next to the enemy, that can also be because they spring you, they surprise you. In a self-defense situation in the street where someone jumps out of an alleyway or something. So having a long weapon isn't always an advantage. In fact, it can even be a disadvantage. If you have something like a greatsword and someone jumps on top of you, that greatsword you can use it as a lever, you can use it in half-swording, but it essentially ceases to be useful in the way that a greatsword is usually useful. In many of those situations, a knife or a dagger may be a more effective weapon now than the spear or the greatsword or the halberd or whatever. Okay, so that's one clear example of where the context changes kind of what weapon you'd want to have, and that's the very reason, or one of the important reasons, of course, why through a large period of history, when hand weapons were still predominant, people often didn't only have one hand weapon, they often had a knife or a dagger for that kind of situation as well. Now there is, within ancient and medieval warfare, there are two battlefield situations that really changed this question of reach. And where I have, and I do stand by the fact that having reach with a weapon in an unarmoured situation is definitely a huge advantage. However, there are two important elements that you find on battlefields that can change that fundamental sort of truth. Okay? One of them is armour and the other one is shields. So let me explain. Firstly, the easiest one to explain is armour. If you imagine the kind of epitome of the armoured man, the sort of 15th or 16th century armoured man-at-arms or knight. In that situation, having very long reach, for example having something like say a spear, or you could say a rapier, the armoured man essentially can take hits as he closes distance, okay? Because to overcome someone in full plate armour with mail or chainmail voiders, in other words, in the gaps between the plate there is mail, and underneath that there's padding, it's very difficult to overcome someone with this level of armour. And so if you have something like a spear, you've really, say I'm an unarmoured spearman or a lightly armoured spearman, maybe just with a padded jack and a helmet, as many spearmen had, and I've got a spear. If the armoured guy charges in on me, I've really only got one, or if I'm lucky, two chances to get that point stuck in a vulnerable point, before which that person's essentially at point blank range, is basically on top of me at wrestling distance. And at wrestling distance I'm kind of screwed because I'm fighting someone who's covered in sheet steel, and I'm struggling trying to find a gap to offend him in, and even when I do find a gap in the plates there's probably mail there. And so I'm really kind of in a wrestling fight with someone who's heavier than me because they're wearing armour and is completely invulnerable to any kind of blow, any kind of punch or knee or anything else I can do like that. I can only really out-wrestle the person or find a gap and get my shorter weapon, my dagger or whatever I have, into a gap. But he has a huge advantage because he's wearing armour, okay? And of course he can strike me with abandon, and his you know, elbows and gauntlets and knees and even his helmet can actually injure me just by striking me alone. So the armoured person has a huge advantage against the unarmoured person. I'll talk more about armoured fighting in future videos. In fact, I have full plate armour, and it's something, because it takes a certain amount of time to put it on, it's something I've kind of veered away from doing because I can't do it in a quick video, but I will do armoured videos, I promise you. So armour is one thing that changes the fundamental truth of having extra reach is a big advantage. If I have extra reach but the other person has full armour, my extra reach doesn't really do an awful lot. There's certain exceptions to that where, if for example I have something like a halberd or a poleaxe, then they are better suited perhaps to stopping or halting or knocking back the person who's in armour than something like a spear or certainly something like a rapier would be. The rapier is really going to not really do much at all to someone in full plate armour. Your best option if you have a rapier and your opponent has full plate armour is to probably throw the rapier at them and run as fast as you can in the opposite direction, or bring a pistol. So armour really changes this fundamental truth of reach, and armoured fighting very, very often comes to very, very close range. Even if the two people, say you've got two people in armour and they're both using poleaxes or halberds, something like this, even if they're using weapons like this, that type of fighting still comes very close very often, and that's why specialised armoured weapons like the poleaxe, and Lindy Beige did a pretty good mini documentary on the poleaxe recently, which I approve of actually. It's got lots of good information in it. Something like the poleaxe, which is specifically designed for armoured fighting, unlike the halberd incidentally, the poleaxe is, you'll notice, shorter. It's usually only about the height of a man, 5 or 6 feet, and it has points at both ends, and it has usually languettes on the shaft. So the poleaxe is actually, if you look at it, it's not like a halberd. It's not for striking as far away as possible. It's actually fairly short for a polearm. It's something really that's got a huge amount of leverage that you can strike fairly far with. You can have a longer reach than with a longsword, for example, but it hits with a lot more force than a sword will ever do, and it can fight in close because it's got both ends on it and multiple types of head. Okay, and if you look at Hans Talhoffer's treatise from 1459, the Copenhagen version, you'll see that there's a version of a poleaxe in there, we don't know if it was ever made, that has interchangeable parts with screw on and screw off sort of different spikes and hooks and stuff that you can put on it. Very cool thing. So the specialised weapons for fighting in armour often don't accentuate reach, they accentuate other things. The ability to penetrate, in other words having points, percussive points, the warhammer, certain types of mace, and of course the poleaxe. And they're generally speaking not very long because actually reach isn't a very big advantage when fighting in armour. Now going to the other thing which changes the fundamental truth of reach is a big advantage is shields. Okay, now this is a bit more complicated because for most of history, when large shields were in use, people wore relatively light armour. The exception to that being perhaps the Roman legionaries that did have lorica segmentata for a period of time, although modern Hollywood would have you believe that they wore it for all of their sort of the great period of the Roman Empire, which they didn't. In actual fact, Roman legionaries wore mail armour for quite a lot of the empire's history, and other types of things as well, which again I might go into in a different video. But for most of history and for most cultures, actually when the large shield was used either with a sword or a spear, the armour was generally speaking light armour, certainly light armour by the standards of the 15th century. In other words, you're talking about either a leather cuirass, maybe a mail shirt, a helmet of some kind, and usually, for most periods of history where the shield and spear or shield and sword were in use, nothing really on the arms, maybe mail sleeves if you get to the Norman period, and usually nothing much on the legs, maybe some greaves in the Greek, the Greek period, the hoplites and so on, or again if you go to the Norman period, maybe mail chausses on the legs. But this is relatively speaking light armour, certainly light by the standards of 15th or 16th century plate armour, which is far more protective. So the shield is a game changer in that context, and whilst you can have a very long weapon like a long spear, or indeed a very long sword, the shield enables you to close distance much more safely than if you don't have a shield or you don't have heavy armour. And that's what it really comes down to. So to conclude and to wrap this up, I stick by the fundamental truth of one-on-one fighting with most types of weapon in an unarmoured civilian context. Reach is a huge advantage. Okay, so generally speaking, the longer your weapon, so long as it's not too heavy and too cumbersome and you can still move it quickly, the longer your weapon, generally speaking, the bigger advantage you have in the fight against your one other unarmoured opponent. However, if armour is involved, or if large shields are involved, the game changes, okay, because both armour and large shields give one or both people the ability to close distance, in other words to get past the reach of those weapons and come to close distance much more safely and much more often than you would ever be able to do without large shields or without armour. Okay? And that's a situation, that's a context within which we start to see shorter weapons being very useful. The gladius, the Greek hoplite sword, short warhammers, short maces. These kind of weapons are useful in that context. Okay? So as with anything, weapons is all about historical context. What the people are wearing, what they're trying to do, where they're trying to do it, if they're in a group, if they're in a big group, a small group, or if they're alone, and so on and so forth. Okay? I hope that's helpful. Cheers!